Yeah. So, hey, Stephen. First of all,
Hi,
welcome to India. Yeah.
thank you.
So, hope so you are having a great too.
I am.
Yeah. So, just before moving to GeoStar and this Gen AI, first would like to would want to know about you, like your education, your upbringing, family background, a little bit about that.
For sure. Yeah. I grew up in the Northeast of the United States, Long Island, New York. Um, and I studied computer science and filmmaking in the arts. Worked in the early era of web development and the first wave of VR. Went to Bell Labs, the Multimedia Communications Research Department for a while. Then I worked at an early AGI company that was started by a guy named Ben Gertzel, who is still doing stuff and has a company called SingularityNet that's trying to do community open beneficial AI. Um, After that, I was at Pixar for a long time, where I was a technical artist, and then was the only technical director in Pixar history to also become a screenwriter there. I worked on developing two feature screenplays with Mark Andrews, who directed Brave. After that, I went to Telltale Games, where I was the studio creative director and supervised second season of Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, Wolf Among Us, and Tales from the Borderlands. Then I worked at Hanson Robotics, where I did the personality design and mind architecture for the Sophia android. I also directed two short films featuring Sophia that premiered at Cannes. And afterwards, I went to a company called DJ2 Entertainment, where I developed at least a couple hundred video game adaptations to film and television. The Lara Croft Tomb Raider anime series on Netflix was the one that got made. I went to a company called Genvid Entertainment, where we developed a format that was a hybrid between web and mobile gaming and interactive television. We won an Emmy Award for that, and then pivoted into uh, generative AI. So at Genvid, I designed a Gen AI workflow and orchestration tool that we released in last December, and then also released the same day last December 22-minute Gen AI film called The Seeker that I made with our tool, like while we were building it. And then I came to GeoStar in February of this year.
Cool. So, starting with like a contradiction I found, starting with a computer science degree, switching to Pixar. Like, what made
Well,
you?
I always was working with both computer science and the arts. So, like, I was always interested in storytelling. And so at Pixar, also, we were a very technical company. We had a lot of uh, original work that was done in computer graphics and various techniques for, cloth and hair simulation and workflow and pipeline tools and lighting and so on. The whole company ran off of code. And so it was a great place to be able to be at the intersection of creating things with computer code and also creating amazing stories and visuals.
Now, since you have been part of both deeply technical and creative work, so where you find yourself to be more engaged in technology or creative work?
I think technology can be creative and fun when you're creating something, some new software or a new idea, trying to implement a solution to a problem that you find interesting. But for me, like it's always been a means to an end. And so I find more personal pleasure in creating stories and worlds and visuals and sound and actually making the media that we produce, whether it's a film or a TV series or a short or a music video. Um, and but I do enjoy using technology to try to solve problems and make things that are more interesting, cooler, better. Interactive storytelling has been a big part of my journey, and that's definitely a combination of both writing and also, well, writing and visual storytelling. And implementing in computer code, like the logic of choices and branching and so on, which I think is a very fun and interesting and challenging kind of creating that really fuses both the sort of, the logical and programmatic and algorithmic aspects of computer programming with storytelling. So yeah, I find bringing them together to be immensely satisfying.
Hmm. One more strange U-turn I found in your journey is from being a technical director to screenwriter at Pixar. So the reason for that.
I was interested in doing it, and so I took the screenwriting seminars that we had at Pixar University. I did my screenwriting certificate and advanced certificate at UCLA. Um, and I wrote a bunch of scripts, submitted them to contests, um, quarterfinaled in the nickel competition, um, placed in a bunch of other competitions, Cinestory and so on, and then won uh, 1 year at Austin Film Festival. And those external validations from these festivals were enough to get the then Pixar head of development to put me sort of in the pile of writers to be considered at the studio. And at the same time, I had developed a friendship with Mark and his head of story, Brian, and we were jamming on a lot of story ideas together. And so I was able to get approval to come on board that team as writer. And we developed two feature pitches and then screenplays for a couple of projects that we did in development for a bit over a year in formal development. Um, so I like really just identified I'd always written since I was a kid, and at Pixar as a technical artist, I got to work on a lot of the visuals, but I didn't get to work as much on the storytelling, and that was also very interesting to me. So I just sort of put a lot of effort into developing that skill and proving professional quality output of that skill through all of these external paths of these these educational programs and then these competitions.
Hmm. So it was like your interests and various other reasons like converging you to do and
Yeah,
uh-huh.
absolutely.
Yep. So you had experience at Bell Labs, working at Bell Labs with AI and internet R&D in 90s when these were not the buzzwords. So what do you think what was the misconception then, which is completely disregarded now?
I mean, there were a lot of misconceptions, but I wouldn't say that it was all misconceptions. Like the stuff that we were doing at Bell Labs, the AI was much lighter, and we were more focused on the multimedia and user interface aspects of things. I was working on an AI to try to monitor and display and give you a more humanistic feel to the system health of computer systems. So basically, like a more of a intuitive interface for system administration tasks. But we also did some stuff that was just very human UI focused, a live hand drawn letter writing app, a sort of an intuitive user interface to the New York City subway system that included sort of vignettes and videos and sounds of the various stations, um, and other projects like that. So we were really exploring like how to make computers feel more human as opposed to how to make humans feel more like computers. But in terms of like misconceptions that maybe held us back from getting to where we are today faster, I think that there were some uh, diversions along the way. Perhaps you could look at expert systems as sort of intuitively never having been a true path towards intelligence, um, although they turned out to be useful, very useful for a lot of other things. I really think it was just early. We were just early. Like machine learning really got started as a field around the time that I started working at WebMind, which was after I was at Bell Labs. Um, in terms of applying it in earnest to the idea of pursuing general intelligence in machines. A lot of the early machine learning work came out then. Shane Legg, who went on to co-found Google DeepMind, worked with me at WebMind. We had a group in Australia that was particularly focused on machine learning approaches, while a lot of the rest of the company was doing other R&D into things like um, traditional natural language processing techniques, um, semantic networks, semantic networks with hybridized with neural networks with activation spreading and things like that, genetic programming, genetic algorithms. We really were exploring a lot of the various different kinds of AI techniques that were out there at the time because one had not yet sort of leaped ahead in terms of practical use cases the way that LLMs did after the attention paper. So at the time, we were really looking into what could be sort of a hybridized collection of multiple algorithmic techniques that could combine into a sum that was a whole that was a sum greater than the parts in order to achieve intelligence. I actually think that the success of LLMs at seeming to solve certain practical problems, particularly um, in terms of things like deep search, data organization, a type of reasoning that synthesizes results out of large unstructured data, the cool things that can be done with diffusion models in the creative space may actually be the diversion in the sense that it's completely cut off R&D into other potentially probably necessary techniques, particularly semantic networks that may underlie general intelligence more robustly. Of course, we could be wrong, but with the research cut off, it's hard to say what will come of some of these other techniques if more resources were applied to them. And world models, depending on their conception, some of them are effectively still LLMs, and the ones that aren't may naturally find themselves moving back towards some of these other techniques because without some kind of semantic embedding that fixes meaning in some navigable dimensional space that can be computed on, it is hard for the system to truly be considered learning or to actually have memory, as opposed to being considered to be doing statistical processing and token prediction and having data storage that can be retrieved. Because if the meaning of things is not embedded in the actual quote unquote cognitive architecture, it is unclear exactly how that can be considered learning. And I think a lot of the papers around LLMs right now are sort of starting to reveal that this is indeed the case, that there is no uh, deep sentience or uh, uh, fixed intelligence in LLMs. And it's a very interesting area of study, but LLMs are so uh, prominent and have had demonstrable practical success in enough areas that I think that some of these other techniques outside the very well-funded world model labs headed by people who are prominent enough to attract that funding, the research isn't being done to see what other advances might be able to be made if some of these other techniques were developed to the level that LLMs were developed. And to be fair, it's because someone has not yet stumbled upon or reasoned through or had the stroke of genius of delivering a singular technique like attention in any of those other disciplines or subdisciplines of AI to capture that kind of interest. So perhaps there will be some advances like that in the near future, perhaps not. But I do think that there's a lot of talk right now about the limitations of LLMs, and it's not wrong. And I think that if actual machine intelligence is a viable and desirable goal, that some of these other techniques or new techniques that we have yet to explore are probably going to be necessary.
So you mentioned about funding. So around that time, dot-com bubble burst also occurred. So did that had impact on your field?
But yeah, for sure. The company that Ben founded that I was at, WebMind, went out of business in the first dot-com bubble burst in 2001 when the market crashed. That we went under. A lot of other AI R&D companies went under uh, during that phase of the industry's economic progress. Um, there were a lot of small, imaginative AI companies, both in the software space and in the hardware space, um, that ceased to exist at that time. And you know, hardware, specialist hardware for AI has just recently had a resurgence in the last couple of years as the price of NVIDIA chips has skyrocketed and the availability has declined. So again, like that's an area where a lot more R&D probably could have been being done if the interest and attention and funding had been there longer, because there's a sort of a long gap between the work that was being done in the late 90s and early 2000s in looking at how to optimize silicon for these kinds of learning tasks, which back then were a different structure than just focusing on um, LLMs. But there's a long gap where potentially more advances could have been made if the interest in funding was there. Um, and so I think now that the interest in funding is very focused on LLMs, we're going to get a lot of chips that are very focused on LLMs. And until someone makes a breakthrough in one of these other disciplines, whether it's at one of these world labs or at an organization like SingularityNet, that delivers exciting enough practical results in the short term, the more um, underexplored techniques in AI are going to continue to be underexplored as the focus is placed entirely on LLMs and diffusion models, which certainly from the point of view of making entertainment content, diffusion models are quite useful. So it's not that these techniques have no value, but they are very over-indexed on right now. And people like Jan LeCun are completely right to call out that we're probably overdoing it on one thing when there's still a whole broad field of intelligence understanding that remains underexplored.
Hmm. So if you would recall all your like AI native work like robotics or interface AI or Gen AI, so which technology has given a major boost to current phase?
I mean, right now it's LLMs and diffusion models and the stuff that we're doing with generative AI across the board. I mean, again, there's a lot of limitations, a lot of missteps, a lot of foolish overspending on certain things in the name of hype. But at the same time, LLMs and diffusion models are techniques that do have utility, and we are pushing to be able to do cooler and cooler things with them every day. Um, and I think that in terms of humans working with machines, which I think is what sort of AI creativity really needs to be, what we can do with LLMs and diffusion models right now allows an artist to have a techniques as tools to be able to express themselves and understand that you still need to apply your talent and effort to get the best results and to hybridize them with certain traditional techniques. You can create things that really are your own, but that use the generative AI to be a force multiplier for how you're able to uh, quickly and cost effectively create things that feel bigger and more spectacular than most individual artists were able to achieve before. And I think that LLMs and diffusion models are also able to deliver those kinds of results in certain other areas as well. Obviously, code is one that's talked about quite a lot. Um, but it comes down to understanding that a human expert in the loop is still necessary to get results that are truly your own, truly novel, truly solve the human problems at hand, and also are cost efficient, as companies like Uber and the unnamed company that accidentally blew $500 million have found out recently. So I think that there's a lot of great applications of the current um, areas of focus of AI R&D in a variety of different industries, but you still need to be smart about how you deploy them. And you can't just be like, I'm going to fire all of my employees. I'm going to spend 10 minutes in Claude saying, run my business, and then walk away and expect to have useful and positive results.
So now just switching over to GeoStar. So since you have been appointed as the GenAI Strategy Lead, and you will be hiring, I read about 80 AI specialists. So how does the hiring for such a huge platform, 750 million viewers platform, looks like for?
I mean, I think the hiring for me looks the same way regardless of the size of the platform from two certain perspectives. One of which is it's a fast moving industry, so you want to find people who also can move fast and who are flexible and adaptable and responsive and attuned to the cadence of what's going on. But at the same time, you also need people who are excellent at their craft. Like I said, it's not just the machines will do everything for you. It's how do we use the machines to truly optimize the capabilities of humans who are excellent at the crafts of what we do, which is to make filmed stories that are intended to be enjoyed by, billions of people. And so what we're looking for is people who are dynamic and have excellence in their.
So as you mentioned, as we begin in the, so you mentioned you had been to Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai. So I'm pretty sure you must have been noticing the Indian audience pretty closely. So do you think Indian audience is ready for AI content at such a large scale? So is Hollywood still resisting AI in using with it? So where do you see India in 2 to 3 years in AI development? So, recently I was just watching Reliance Jio 49th general meeting, and uh, according to me, they are trying to build the like a largest AI entertainment house. But the fact I am still skeptical of is that India has not been able to make a global brand yet. So you think in coming years using AI or in any other domain will India be able to make it? Do you find any reasons why we have not been able to do it yet? So just a couple of questions now. Since AI literacy has been speeding up like anything, so what advice you will give to someone like 20-year me? Like, what should we focus on, which has not been taught in curriculum right now? Right. So yes, thank you for your time. Here we'll sum it up. So a great conversation, and would love to chat again. Thank you very much.